Hello and welcome to P2P World. This is Maqbool from The Debate, and today's show we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first is in reference to what is going on in India, and something, of course, that isn't new. What we've been seeing for quite some time now is the kind of human rights abuses and violations that have been going on in the country for quite some time now, especially with regards to the BJP government. And now, of course, with the elections taking place, a third term is also expected. Unfortunately, this is something that hasn't gone unnoticed in the world, but still, there hasn't been any action that has been taken in this regard. The US reports on human rights violations in different countries, and in particular, India's violence that occurred in Manipur with regards to the communities that were targeted was something that was highlighted in the latest US report with regards to human rights violations in India. Again, of course, something that was denied by the Indian state, including the foreign minister, who said that it does not reflect any understanding of India and that this is completely biased and baseless. Of course, such denials have been coming in from the Indian side for quite some time now, but the international community has begun to realize the extent to which such violations exist and the amount of atrocities that have been committed by the BJP and, of course, the state institutions with regards to communities that unfortunately are not sheltered within India. But we're going to be taking a closer look at what this means in terms of the fabric of the society, how the international community is now viewing India, how this changes foreign relationships of India with other countries, and then, of course, with the elections underway, what this means for the future of the country. Our next segment is going to take a look at the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's visit to Saudi Arabia with, of course, the World Economic Forum on the sidelines. There have been a number of meetings that the Prime Minister has engaged in with the Saudi leadership and other counterparts from around the world as well, in which a number of discussions were held, particularly with Saudi Arabia. Of course, trade and investment relationship and ties were discussed in detail, and this is following a visit of a delegation of Saudi leadership that had come to Pakistan a while back, and of course now this has been also reciprocated by Pakistan with a number of key businessmen also accompanying the Prime Minister on this particular visit, with, of course, a lot of statements made towards increasing trade and bilateral relationship within the next 12 to 18 months. And this is also something that we've seen happen in light of what Pakistan is already doing at the economic front with other countries and with the IMF, the leadership of which also met with the Prime Minister in Saudi Arabia. What this means on ground for economic recovery in Pakistan and how exactly will this shape the future is something that we're going to be seeing in further detail. And we're also going to try and understand how this particular interaction is going to reflect upon the SIFC's role, in particular, of bringing FDI in the country. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Faisal. And for our first segment, we've also been joined by Dr. John Dayal, who's a human rights activist, and Mr. BALUCH, former ambassador. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of the discussion and for joining us in the show today. Dr. John Dayal, I'm going to start with you with what has been going on in India. Of course, you're not new to what has been happening, and we've discussed this at length in even our shows many times before. But again, we see that there has been an instance where the world has recognized what has happened in India, or what has been happening in India, and we see that the US has reported on human rights violations, and irrespective of whatever else has been happening in the international community, I want to understand what reference does this bring in terms of the way that India is now viewed by these countries as well. I understand that the report is there, and there are multiple reports previously that have also come out, but does that also reflect a change in the lens through which India is now seen?
India continues to be in denial about any, not just this one, any international reflection or spotlight on its human rights record. I mean, it could, because of its obligations to IMF and World Bank, not be so sharing economic data, financial data, but on human rights. It is as bad as any other country in the world. But at the end of the day, it is not the US report or the Indian denial that matter. What matters is how do religious minorities and ethnic minorities in the country feel about themselves. Do they feel secure? Do they feel threatened? Do they feel enclosed? Or do they feel embraced? And I am so sorry to have to tell the world, but you do it on a very daily basis, that religious minorities, which is Muslims and Christians in particular, and ethnic minorities, which are tribals, and the castes, unfortunate outcasts called the Dalits, they are absolutely not feeling any more secure than they were last year or ever since Mr. Modi came into power. The hate campaign, the Islamophobia, the coalescing of political hate and institutional blindness, if I may say so, creates a situation where we really do not know how to reflect. Is the voting in the first round or second round, which is supposed to be less than expected, and there seems to be, and what analysts say, a slight wave, if not a big wave, a slight wave at the ground on Mr. Modi's position with the people, a slight reduction in his appeal to the people. These are collectively creating a situation where, on the one hand, Mr. Modi is making very desperate outreach to Christians and to a section of Muslims, and on the other hand, has increased his invective and the volume of his hate campaign. And this is slightly difficult to understand why he is doing it. One indication is that the religious minorities are still target of hate, but now I think they're gathering some strength to challenge him. One indication of this was the attitude of two major Kerala bishops, one reflecting the opinion of the Dalit Christians, the tribals, the boatmen, the fishermen, the coconut climbers, and the other, the upper caste one. Both of them refused to meet a special envoy of Mr. Modi, who he had sent to placate them on the eve of the voting which took place 2 days ago. And I think this is possibly the first time in 3 years or 4 years, I would say, that a bishop, apart from Bangalore, has dared tell Mr. Modi that I will not even hear your envoy, because I think it's a wrong thing to do. It will send out a very bad signal about the minority community, and if you're scared of your what. So I think in the last 1 week since we last met, this is the one major signal that perhaps, just perhaps, Mr. Modi's threats have lost a little bit of the edge that they used to have.
Right. Ambassador Baloch, with reference to what we've seen the US also talk about, it's something that Pakistan has echoed also many times before, and not just verbally on different platforms, but of course also, of course, we've put forward many dossiers as to what has been happening, and not just in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, but also within India against minorities, including, of course, Muslims. And I want to understand then whether or not we have over the years seen any shift in the way that the impact has been created. Do you think that in whatever ways Pakistan has been putting forward this stance, has that led to an outcome that we were hoping for?
Well, I won't rather go for a categorical yes, no, or maybe. Rather, I'd like to dilate first on actually what is happening within India. What is happening in India is that its basic fabric, as I've been saying, the Indian soul is being completely taken out of this republic, which we knew 40 years back, 50, 30 years back. And unfortunately, is being recast into entirely something very, very dangerous creature as a state. That's my worry. In fact, it's not only my worry, but several such writings have come. In fact, the latest, which has come by two very important scholars, one is Ashtonash Warshane and Connor Staggs. What have they suggested? That perhaps India of today resembles the South America of 19th century, when the slavery was, although at the federal level was abolished, yet there were local and state laws which were called as Jim Crow. I think there was some politician that kept the segregation in different states. So it is not, it is kind of a reverse of it. That seems to me that the BJP has been working very methodically. I wouldn't go on the rhetoric of electioneering. That always happens, whether they cozy up to the minorities, talk to the bishop, talk to the, as our learned scholar was telling us, Dr. Saab. But I would like to rather say that what are the vulnerabilities for the minorities? Now what happens is that perhaps there is a very systematic, sophisticated way of that I have already before also said that there is kind of a very sophisticated ethnic cleansing of the minorities, particularly of the Muslims, happening. How it is happening, I will explain. What happens in this phenomena when ethnic cleansing happens, that you first of all demonize that group of people, that they are the real villains of all of you. They are the like alter enemies of us and they. So that is where. So we see a very persistent, very continuous, very constant and at large narrative of labeling all minorities in general and Muslims in particular. When the Prime Minister of India says, Ghus betiye, I heard that his statement. What does that mean? You are telling your own citizens who have been citizens for centuries of this soil. How do you tell them Ghus betiye, as our learned colleague Mr. Raja Faisal had pointed out? It's not, it is something else behind it. We may refute it, but that shows what is happening, that they're preparing their communities and they are demonizing that very community. That is the beginning of the process of ethnic cleansing. Second is, what happens is that such a force does it, it obliterates the history, the historical context of those people, as if they never existed. They exist as they now interpret them. So we see Muslim history, Muslim names, Muslim places are gone. In fact, the entire Mughal era of Indian history is gone from the syllabus of the schools. The latest report suggests, I don't know, Dr. Saab can give us more confirmation on that, but this is what I read. Then what happens is that you legalize violence against that community. And this is what exactly we've heard. I have read several of these names. They say killing of these people, harming them is all right to go ahead with it, because we ultimately have to get rid of this demon that they are talking about. So I think there's a very, very dangerous drift of India into a state which would not look like a democracy, which would not look like any other. It would look like some kind of a different creature. It will be an apartheid of its own kind in a very larger way. So I think the world has to know it. We would not, the Indians cannot hide behind these platitudes of denial. They are systematically going through a process of ethnic cleansing of Muslims and minorities. I think the world has to understand it. The minorities have to understand it. The intellectuals and liberal class of India has to understand. And we as a neighbor do understand it. And all of that have to come together to, in fact, help India. It's not about helping only minorities. What I am saying is that great India, where is that shining India? No way. It is going down the drain as a republic, as a democracy, as a civilized state. Yes, Anna.
Very true, very true. Ambassador Baloch, we are very lucky always to have you and Dr. Dayal in our show, because it's just a sort of, we always learn from both of you. And as you have earlier mentioned about the hate-filled politics against of course, the minorities, this is the politics of BJP, especially, of course, since Modi has been, holding the reins of the party. Of course, we have seen that this hate-filled politics, it had persisted within India, and that is what we are seeing right now. Of course, I mean, last week we were talking about how he used the word Ghusbaitia for all of the Muslims and Christians and rest of the minorities within India. And this time around, I mean, during the weekend, Dr. Dayal, during the weekend, I've been going through few of the statements of Modi, and in them statements, he's been, diverting it towards the LOC. He's been highlighting, of course, Pulwama, and he's been, utilizing the hate against Pakistan, a neighboring country, Pakistan, and he's been trying to garner some of the votes from within the masses, and of course, he's been injecting them with the hate. A country like Pakistan, a country like India, where people to people interactions, whenever they take place, there is no hate at all. I mean, I personally studied from England, and I realized it there that the hate factor which we see from the politicians like Modi, it does not exist when people to people interactions are made. I mean, I never felt anything. And for the British, me and my Indian classmates, we were all same. I mean, there was no difference at all. But when, of course, comes to Modi's politics, what we are seeing is, initially, of course, we saw previously he's been utilizing hate against the minorities living within the India, and now he's trying to garner support from the hate against Pakistan. Don't you think countries having nuclear power and very capable armies, both of the sides, it's alarming for the region and for the people at large, especially from both sides. I mean, there are so many problems, troubles, and struggles which are going through both of the people. In that kind of environment, I mean, a politician like Modi and narratives like BJP is promoting, don't you think it's very, very odd, and this must end now? Yeah.
Dr. John, you wanted to add something earlier as well, and you can answer the question too.
No, I would like to respond to His Excellency and Raja Saab on this thing, and I will begin by saying, is Ghusbaitia better or worse than being called Dimak, termites? So, the vocabulary, unfortunately, goes from bad to worse to the most vicious possible, and I am ashamed that they are not shamed by the words that they utter, that come out of their mouth, and the courts don't take notice of. Secondly, of course, Pakistan continues to be an important factor in generating hate, generating tension, polarizing the people, because the popular slogan would be to go back to Pakistan. And then, of course, that's for the Muslims. For the Christians, they haven't been able to define which country they would like to send me back to. But what emanates from His Excellency's exposition is, the Hindu Rashtra is the stated goal of the RSS, which will complete its century very, very soon. The BJP is a wing, a creation, a daughter of the RSS. The cadres of the RSS, which have expanded exponentially since Babri Masjid was demolished, are the electoral instruments by which the BJP gathers vote. It's a very finely tuned election machinery, where even a sub-booth, election booth, and how the first 100 people would be the responsibility of somebody else to bring them, and so on and so forth. It is called Panna Pramukh, page chief. The RSS, without the RSS, the BJP is nothing. Mr. Modi is trying to be even bigger than the RSS, but if he were to bank on elections without the RSS, he would get a vote. So let us not sort of bifurcate this whole instrument in BJP and RSS as two different things. I have always said they are one, and when the issue comes, when push comes to shove, they act as one. And in this election, they are acting as one. What Excellency sort of tangentially referred to, and what is frightening to us, is the instruments of state sort of acquiescing or agreeing with this, and not acting the independence that they have been given under the Constitution, which means the Election Commission is totally in the pocket of Mr. Modi, which is very, very frightening. If the opposition member just utters a word, they send him a notice. Mr. Modi and Mr. Shah, in particular, can utter anything and no action is taken. The Supreme Court, which sometimes seems to be liberal and seems to be independent, when the push comes to shove, they unfortunately also fall in line. So those are instruments whose decreasing relevance gives us a cause of worry. I do not think, and I hope it will never be, Hindu Rashtra would be impossible. You cannot do cleansing of more than 200 million people. This is 200 million, this is not 6 million. And that's a huge number. I mean, the Arabian Sea will not be able to take all those bodies. So that, I think, is a pipe dream of the RSS. But in trying to reach that pipe dream, they're causing untold suffering and unease in the minds of the same 200 million people. It is quite a lot of misery.
Right. Farrukh, there's, of course, a lot of discussion with regards to what's going on within India. And we've, of course, had this discussion on this very platform many times before. And there are many others, of course, that discuss it in their own capacities. Of course, the reports such as that the US has come out with is also evidence of the fact that there is something going on. But despite that, there doesn't seem to be much value that it adds to the way things are. And while we may talk about what's going on within India or how that's shaping Indian society and what's impacting the politics of India, will that matter enough if it doesn't changes the way that countries or people outside of India, interact with its leadership, interact with what seems to be the third term in office that Modi is going to enjoy?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the question. I think that we are actually looking at from the kind of wrong angle.
Okay.
I must mention this because last time when we were discussing India and when it came to war rukwa di papa, right? So at that time Raja Faisal actually pointed out when I was talking about parting of the river Nile, at that time Raja Faisal actually reminded me of this movie called Bruce Almighty, right? So in Bruce Almighty, the man is given all the powers, but he is told, all the powers of God, but he is told that you cannot mess with free will. And there comes a problem, right? Because we believe in Westphalian system and because the international order is based on, independent states and their sovereignty, and India has a government that is jealously guarding that idea, right? So anybody who does whatever they do to pressure them or name them or shame them doesn't seem to bring about any change. It is like a hostage situation. If there is a building which is, whose a family inside is kept hostage, and then you are the authorities outside, you can blame or shame those who are inside. But it won't change the fact that those people are in mortal danger. What do you have to do? You have to storm the building. Now that can happen with buildings where you have police, but it doesn't seem to happen with international system, especially with people or countries which are too influential. India seems to have actually not only strengthened or reasserted its own sovereignty claims, but it is also jealously trying to police other countries' freedom of expression. There was a Canadian episode today where Khalsa Day was being celebrated and Canadian Prime Minister was there, and they actually chanted slogans in support of Khalistan, right? And all of a sudden India calls the High Commissioner or the ranking diplomat to actually give him their peace of mind. So it is active policing or censorship that they are trying to export. So international angle doesn't matter. What is happening inside does. And I tell you one thing for sure, minority were never in contention. They are at the mercy of majority. It happens in every country, right? It happens here as well. But the problem right now is that when you look at the overall situation and how India is being, Indian government is treating its people, something seems to have changed. What exactly is that? Because the second turn, voting phase actually concluded on 26th, and there is this undercurrent that people keep on talking about. A decline in voting patterns in the region that are influenced by Narendra Modi. So the question then is, what are the issues that are actually eating up India's politics, right? The first one is the leadership crisis within BJP. Modi, they say, might retire at the age of 75, that is September next year. He might not, but he hasn't clarified that position. It is a policy of BJP. So then Amit Shah becomes the, inheritor or successor, and that causes jealousies within the parties that might have dampened the spirit of BJP. Then the second thing which is very important is the crisis of constitutional guarantees, the reservations to the most vulnerable in the society, the Dalits, the ST/SC, and then of course OBC, that amount to more than 50% of the population. So they are worried that if BJP returns with Bahumat, or for that matter bigger majority, they are going to change the constitution, right? And hence abolish reservations or quota system meant for, the downtrodden. Now, the idea that the constitution cannot change is not that correct in my humble opinion. You need a trifecta to actually bring about the change. What is trifecta? You are talking about trichotomy of power. The first aspect is what? Legislature. The second one is the executive, the government, and of course the courts or Supreme Court for that matter. Now, why do you think right-wingers are so popular in the West? Trump is so popular among the right-wingers in America because he brought America the closest to trifecta, where all these three branches were occupied by the same school of thought. So at this moment, there seems to be that kind of change that is happening. Legislature is already taken. I understand America and India both are complicated. They have multiple tiers of government. But it seems that they have totally controlled the federal or the union, executive. Then in the Supreme Court also you seem to see a lot of people who are coming up and who are more conservative than the current Chief Justice, and that change may eventually occur. And finally, legislature is totally helpless. Now what remains are the states. There are many states in India, out of which 12 states are currently occupied by BJP. If that increases, they might be able to bring about that kind of change. So everybody is afraid, and that's why they don't want to actually do much to support Modi, or it is so claimed. The third one is of course bread and butter matters, and that's why all the persistent efforts. By the way, today Modi mentioned Pakistan by name, and it is a first. Before that he was talking in riddles, but today he mentioned any attempt to deflect attention, taking it to minorities or taking it to Pakistan, doesn't seem to be working. So that's why they are getting desperate.
Yeah, Sana, with your permission, I wanted to go towards Ambassador Baloch. Ambassador Baloch, we know that they have been obviously, promoting hate against the minorities of India for last 2 terms. And supposedly, once more, Modi wins the election, BJP wins the election, and they bring their ideology to rule over India once more. At the same time, knowing that for last 8 to 10 years, they have been supported by the Western world in a way that they kept an eye closed on India, whatever was going on in India, and they have been, of course, condemning whatever was going on, but there was not a solid step that could have been taken by the Western world against India. Can you say that in coming days, of course, if we see BJP's government once more and Modi becomes Prime Minister once more, this thing of course will increase, and if it does increases, still can we say that the Western world would remain silent? If so, then what's the reason behind it?
Well, I'll only not try to put any blame on the Western world as such, because there are very varied geoeconomic and geopolitical dynamics which are existing now, but they might change. I will rather go to more fundamental question, that when we see an existential threat to the minorities in India, when we see India kind of going distorted into a authoritarian and an autocratic republic right in South Asia, with repercussions in the entire region, because then we have our own fault lines in each country. So if India can set that as a model where a majoritarian rule can do what they can do with their minorities, it is a bigger stake. This is what I said in my previous talk with you, that it is the democracy for me which is under threat. It is the soul of India which is under threat by BJP. It is actually a civilized order within South Asia which is under threat because of what BJP, actually RSS, wants to do in the name of BJP. So can something be done? Since we are there, Dr. Shah is here with us, so I thought I'd just submit a couple of points which then he can build on and see if they can be of anything. I think there's still something can be done. What are those? I will name them. First of all, a intellectual resistance of intellectuals and civil society within India, within South Asia, and at the international level. What we are, it's a limited debate, but let this debate should enlarge that what is happening with India. We need to tell the world, come on, look at it, what is happening. Democracy is dying, a republic is dying, minorities are being prepared to be ethnically cleansed, are totally physically eliminated. One. Second, also that minorities in India have to revisit their own strategies. I think they have failed despite being in minority. I think they have not played their cards properly. There are several states where minority votes are either divided or they have been deliberately divided by BJP through mechanization and the alliances that they are made. So they need, somebody has to. The other thing is that there's no leadership, unfortunately, of minorities in India, whether it is a Christian community or Muslim or the other minorities. So there has to be some kind of a collective leadership which must come and give resistance. Congress is not good enough to just lead all of you. They have other baggage to carry. The minorities have to have their own leadership. Then is activation of other multilateral forums, United Nations, Human Rights Commission, several other civil society organizations which need to look at it. We already have seen an ethnic cleansing in Bosnia, Herzegovina. We don't want to see another Bosnia in India. We are seeing it in Palestine. We don't want to see it in India. We don't want to see it in Kashmir. So I think the world has to be told. We have to shout at the rooftops of everywhere we are. That's what is happening in India. They need to really wake up. Then, of course, the Pope has to be brought in by the Christians. The OIC has to be brought in by the Muslims, and because they have responsibilities towards minorities. I know of OIC that there is a mandate for them to make sure that they are mandated to see that the minorities in other countries are not deprived of their faith, practicing of faith, their identities, their cultures. So this has to be done, and I think overall the liberal civil society globally has to come together to the help of India, not minority. I say of India. Only then I think we can really get these demons. I say these are the demons, not the minorities are the demons. They are the demons who are eating out the soul of India.
Right.
That's
Right, and I'd also like to take Dr. John Dayal, your perspective on this, because also earlier when Faisal even posed this question, you were smiling. So I want you to elaborate on that as well. But add to that, with regards to what Ambassador Saab said, of course, he's proposed his own perspective as to where he thinks change can happen. But I also want to know whether you agree with that or not. Where do you see hope or change possible? Is it within the people of India, of the world? Is it within the elections, the parties? Is it within the countries of the world? Where exactly do you see change possible?
And Dr. Dayal, since you are sitting in India right now, the question at this moment is that there seems to be a change. Dr. Saab, there seems to be change of tone since 19th of April when this entire electoral process started. So do you think that something has changed on ground when it comes to elections, or nothing seems to have changed? What happened? What are you?
The international situation,
I missed something?
No.
the political situation within India and minority. So let me first, as I always tell you, the international situation is not of our doing, it's not of your doing. Even say in Ukraine, even in Gaza, we have seen the international order subservient to its own military and economic ends and its geostrategic ends. The Great America has not really been able to do what it wanted to do in the NATO-Russia situation, where it could bomb and kill a few Iranians, but it has not been able to intervene as it could have once upon a time. It hasn't been able to do that. On Gaza, all international players, including the Islamic players, have bowed and seen 7,000 children, 100 journalists, like they're my brothers, killed, and nobody has bothered. 37,000 or whatever is the toll today. International order is subservient to its selfish interest. The Rothschilds were once, it is the military industrial combine in the US, which gives arms to Israel and to Ukraine, which ultimately actually help the big companies of America rather than helping these other countries get arms. Between US, Israel, and India is a bond that is fed on total mutual interest. I think the three of them, whatever is the positions that they take in diplomacy, are to be considered as one geostrategic unit when they play. In the China front, the Quad is there. So India is no longer even the token non-aligned it used to be once when it was a partner of Russia, but theoretically was non-aligned. It is not that. It is quite clearly militarily, policy-wise aligned with America, and it's not yet a client state, but just by this fact, America is going to turn a blind eye to anything sort of putting the nuclear bomb on your own people. So let us not, I mean, even I, as a person who keeps on appealing to the UN and to all the international fora, I know that nothing will come. Nothing will come. We don't want sanctions of any sort, and they wouldn't, even if we wanted, they wouldn't do that. So let's dismiss it. The second thing, as Excellency pointed out, is what he called the soul of India. The soul of India is the rule of law. It is not making Muslims and Christians politically equal to the Hindus. No, majority does not mean majoritarianism. When the rule of law is absent, then even a majority would become majoritarian. But just now it is 20% minorities, 80% India, Hindu, and therefore for the next 500 years, we would in a way be living with a huge majority of Hindus with whom we have no war. One of the reasons that the elections continue to take place and Mr. Modi has not dismissed the parliament and dismissed the constitution 5 years ago is that the large 80% Hindu is not BJP. At his best, he has not been able to cross the 40% of the voting not the 40% of India. So if you do the computation, maybe he's got a quarter of India thinking like him, which is a huge number, which is equal to the minorities put together. But it leaves 50% of the Hindus neutral, if not aligned with them. And if they're not aligned with Mr. Modi, then they're aligned with me. That it stands to reason. The third, Excellency mentioned, and even Farrukh mentioned, and I disagree with that, is that we are taking Mr. Shah as the putative designated successor of Mr. Modi. Not so. Mr. Amit Shah and Mr. Dayal, for that matter, are major domos. They're major domos. They have no political identity other than being in the pocket of Mr. Modi as the henchman. They're major domos, they're henchmen, they're staff, political staff that summon people, abuse them, and send them back using the threat of Mr. Modi.
Right, absolutely. Point taken, Dr. John.
Half a second.
Okay, go ahead.
Are elsewhere, and we have to keep an eye on that. Don't take your eye off them.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. John Dayal. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you so much for being on the show. And thank you, Mr. Dr. BALUCH, for being on the show. It's always a pleasure to have you both. We're going to also go ahead and speak a little bit about the Prime Minister's visit to Saudi Arabia and, of course, the engagement, especially on the trade and investment front that he's been engaging with the Saudi leadership and different counterparts. And Faisal, of course, we've seen previously to this visit that there was a delegation from Saudi Arabia that also came in. And so this discussion is continuing for quite some time now with regards to our relationship with Saudi Arabia. And of course, this is also nothing new. But what do you expect, in particularly given the circumstances that we are in right now and the kind of engagement we've had through the SIFC with Saudi Arabia? What exactly will this visit hold true for us, especially in terms of trade and investment?
Yes, and obviously when we talk about brotherly relations between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, very recently we saw that Saudi foreign minister, he was in Pakistan as well. And of course, the investments that are going to be made in Pakistan, of course, we know that for next 5 years, we will be seeing that $5 billion would be invested every year in Pakistan. And for that, of course, Saudis, they have discussed the feasibilities of investments in Pakistan. And that is why, of course, we are seeing that the SIFC is doing its best to bring that direct investment in Pakistan. And that is quite important to have this visit there. But at the same time, we know that Prime Minister highlighted many points on World Economic Forum. Like I said, COVID-19, the way Pakistan dealt with COVID-19, he highlighted the health issues as well, and the kind of burden that actually Pakistan's economy saw in the health sector during that time. He highlighted that. Then later on, of course, he highlighted the kind of climate change is affecting Pakistan's economy as well. We know that Pakistan faced dire situations during the floods that took place in Pakistan, especially in two of the provinces. When we talk about Balochistan and Sindh, the havoc that was made there and the economic losses that were made there. Prime Minister highlighted them as well at this forum, and it was very important for Pakistan to do it. And at the same time, he highlighted the opportunities which are going to be raised in Pakistan and created in Pakistan for the investment for coming years. He highlighted that as well. And on the sidelines, of course, he had he has been meeting with the delegations from other countries as well, important countries, and them of course Prime Minister was inviting them countries as well to send in their businessmen in Pakistan so that they can be they can get interested in investing in Pakistan in different sectors of Pakistan. Of course, we know that SIFC is playing its pivotal role when it comes to highlighting Pakistan's agriculture sector, Pakistan's IT sector, Pakistan's mining sector.
Right.
So all of these sectors, they will be, of course, highlighted in front of all of these countries so that they can send in their businessmen, their investors in Pakistan. And of course, Pakistan is still attracting the investments, the foreign direct investments in Pakistan. So it's all good for the economy.
Right. Farrukh, how much will it impact in the ways that we are dealing with the IMF, especially with regards to engagements, particularly with Saudi Arabia and the kind of commitments that have been made earlier and the contribution that SIFC has made in this partnership?
Right, Sana, thank you very much. I think that, board meets later tonight and it is going to clear the remaining amount of SBA. I'm talking about IMF. After that, of course, we are going to hear about our request regarding a new program, and of course, then there is going to be some kind of assessment. Regarding Saudi Arabia, look, there isn't any shred of doubt in my mind that Saudi isn't one of the closest and best friends this country has, right? It has repeatedly supported Pakistan, even when the country went nuclear. It was essentially Saudi support that kept us going. Similarly, in recent crises, these 2 or 3 countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and of course China, they actually held our hands and they supported the baseline support that was needed. That of course is a given. Now what happens right now is regarding materializing of the pledges that were made into some kind of action. There seems to be some kind of weight. I don't know what exactly is it about. Are we going to see the investment start in June, in July perhaps, because a new financial year starts, perhaps because there is some kind of waiting regarding the reforms that are needed. The SIFC that you mentioned, remember this is not a natural outcome of the processes in the country. There is a reason why you have actually created SIFC, and that is that there is too much clutter, too many windows, and then regarding the 3 tiers of government, there is too much bureaucracy that actually scares away the investor. So it is like installing a lift in a building to ensure that you can go from point 1 to point B without any hassle, and ensuring that there is one window. But then again, we have been talking about these investments and others for past many months, actually more than 1 year. So regarding like the pledges that were made at Geneva regarding our flood rescue and rehabilitation, similarly I still keep on waiting for the day when we will see these commitments materializing. Until then, they are merely commitments.
Absolutely. Thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal. There's, of course, a lot that remains to be seen. And as Farrukh has said, there needs to be some tangible action that we're going to see to move ahead. And hopefully that will be the case after this particular visit. And of course, with regards to India, there's going to be a lot of discussions with regards to what is happening in terms of the elections, but also, of course, what Pakistan has been talking about for quite some time now. And we hope to see a change on that front as well. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll now see you tomorrow. क्या आप देख रहे थे